Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I am your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could, please down below, like, comment, subscribe. What did you think of Avatar, Fire and Ash, the third installment in the ever-growing Avatar franchise, directed by James Cameron? But remember, everything we review here will always have full spoilers. And I definitely want to talk about some of the plot points that are in this movie. But for everyone that has not seen this yet, go ahead and save this video, come back to it later, and then tell me what you thought of it. As for everyone else, let's move on. Avatar, Fire and Ash. What's it about? It is the third installment again. And the conflict on Pandora escalates as Jake and Neytiri's family encounter a new aggressive Na'vi tribe. Again, as per usual, pretty narrow in terms of plot, but there is so much movie here. It's like 3 hours and 15 minutes long, and I gotta say, didn't feel a second of it. Here's what's funny about the Avatar movies for me. My experience with them has been that the first one is a technical marvel, and I can acknowledge that. Admittedly, though, I'm not gonna pretend that I was one of the people in the mid 2010s that was like, when is Avatar 2 coming out? When is Avatar 2 coming out? I have not really noticed anybody mention this all that much, but after the first Avatar, if you were like a film person, if you were like the designated film person of the people that you knew, the amount of people that would ask when there would be a new Avatar movie the moment they found out you liked movies was astronomical. So I kind of I've never bought the Avatars had no cultural impact thing that sometimes people use to throw at the arguments there. And then the first one, again, I said I saw in 3D. I was one of the people that I saw it, when I was 9 or 10 years old? Yes, it was stunning. It was one of those just awe-inspiring, transformative things. And over the course of time, it's sort of aged in an interesting way. I think that some of the environmental stuff holds up just fine, but it does feel very repetitive in terms of what the first one does. I like that movie overall, but I think that it ends up kind of being the one that I think has some of the complaints that I hear people talk about with Way of Water and Fire and Ash. I like that movie, but now seeing where it goes story-wise in 2 and 3, I think the reason why the story there is so simple is so James Cameron could go nuts with these new ones. And if you were around for our Way of Water review a couple years back, you remember me saying the same thing. I liked the first one. The second one, though, I loved. I thought that this franchise has really elevated itself. I had that whole It's Always Sunny moment where I was like, oh my God, I get it. I understand it now. And I thought it was a monumental achievement in terms of action storytelling, in terms of emotional storytelling. And I thought that it had so much new world building that I thought was really well done with the Water Tribe and a lot of the stuff that involved the whales and the commentary and whaling that's happening here. And with the third one, I'm going to get into some of the other stuff I've heard, because I'm going to tell you right now, if you're looking for somebody that has genuine critiques of this movie, you're not going to find them here. Let's answer this first. Did I love it? Did I hate it? Or am I somewhere between on it? I think that the Avatar franchise has decided to elevate itself, to grow upon itself, expand upon itself, and just improve in every single way possible every time. 2 and 3 are companion pieces of 2 modern blockbusters that I think are genuinely jaw-dropping and inspiring in terms of what they are. This movie was phenomenal, and I kept seeing all the things about, it's a repeat of Way of Water, and I do go into each one of these installments with a little bit of trepidation because of the fact that I just like the first one. I'm willing to critique this franchise. I wasn't starting off with they're all going to be perfect no matter what. I went in with an eye for these to see what would be wrong with them, and I've been proven wrong 3 separate times now, each time, because I like the first one, but Way of Water and Fire and Ash are of a piece with each other, because I do feel not like it's a retread. I've seen some people say that it follows similar plot points. And to me, I feel like you're not really engaging with the material if you think it's just the same exact movie. I think that it expands upon a lot of the plot elements that are introduced here. But before we fully get into that, let's go ahead and go into the full-on pros here. Let's start off with the easy ones. This movie's gorgeous. It is definitively, I mean, essentially nearly an animated movie, but it is just an astonishing piece of work. I think that I go out of my way to see these in 3D with the HFR, the high frame rate, because I always try and find the way that the director wants you to experience something, and here it's very much doing so. I think that this is just, if you're going for the visuals alone, you'll have a spectacular time. Of course you will. But I do think that in terms of just spectacle, earlier on this year, Tron Ares came out, and I didn't like that very much. I think I gave that the most like middle of the road review possible. And here, the visuals of that compared to this feels more than just stunning CG. It feels transporting. It feels otherworldly. I think that's the thing that James Cameron does so well here. The moment you sit down, you feel essentially like you are in a different place. And I'm sure that's a cliche thing to say, but it just is true. I think that Pandora here is so expanded upon. The second one introduced the water tribe, and here the ash stuff I could have even used more of. But the way that they're introducing these tribes and the Air clan, I don't really quite remember their name, but there's so many different rules in how this works, and the fact that none of it is explained and instead it's all shown makes this feel like you are just in something otherworldly. Like the whole gateway to Pandora, in terms of, you know, there's the whole idea of you are an avatar, like in a video game, right, to be shown this other world, and that was Jake Sully in the first one, and now here he's very much integrated into it as part of the Na'vi. And I think that this just holds up so well in terms of having a visual language for its own world. That's much harder to do than I think people give credit for. And I can see, I guess, where some people are like, oh, it's just a repeat same thing with the water tribe back in this. And they are in there a lot. They're fully integrated into being a part of the water tribe. But I think that sets up something that I noticed about James Cameron's storytelling for these movies. And I think that he watches a lot of anime. He said so himself with Guillermo del Toro. And I feel like I'm a huge One Piece fan. You can see it even right here. I'm a gigantic One Piece fan. So I'm not a person that can critique pacing. I'm not the one to do it. And I think that immediate giveaway is how the Fire Tribe is introduced and how the Water Tribe works, because I was like, oh, they're doing arcs. I was like, they're introducing individual plot points that are being expanded upon while also introducing new characters and also going into that. And then it's also basically following this like shonen back and forth and being about so many different things in terms of interacting with environment. I was like, this is partially One Piece, and this is also partially just how Princess Mononoke and anything Ghibli. I was just like, that's what he's doing. That's what this is. And I have to say that I really, really liked the world building of that, in terms of, also, I talk about theme all the time, but there's so much thematically happening here. I think that to say that these movies have nothing going on underneath the surface is wild to me. They are about so much, and I think that this one is even going for this Old Testament sort of storytelling. And they practice this faith to their person they believe in, Ewa. You hear that name so much throughout this. And there's also the idea of Immaculate Conception, with the Avatar being sort of a clone, but also not necessarily. That's still not fully explained with Sigourney Weaver's character, but I'm waiting for it because I like that plot point a lot, where they're going with that. And also there's a scene, since we can get into full spoilers here, that really parallels along with the Abraham and Isaac story, and there's so much in terms of, let's get into that thematically first. There's so much to dive into with this. One of them with that is that Jake Sully and Neytiri, Zoe Saldana's character, have to come to a point where they're like, listen, they have to come to a moral compromise, because there is a scene in this in which they need to kill Spider, or they want to kill Spider, because they feel like if the humans, if the sky people get a hold of him, they can sort of use that, his breathing, to their advantage, and they can take advantage of that. And so they view it as, there's no other way, let's just kill him. And they take him out into the forest, and they nearly do it. But then there's this really quiet moment with Neytiri, who spends a lot of the first half of her arc of this movie angry and rageful because of the stuff that happens in the second one with losing her son. And she's washing the blood off her hands in the water, and then she looks back, and it's just this quiet moment out of this loud movie that brings her to this sort of realization at that point that there has to be another way, after she kept saying the whole time, I hate humans, there's such hate in their heart, only to realize that she's also doing something similar in terms of how she feels about the people that are stacked against her. And one other thing that leads in from that is the idea of environmentalism. And I know that there's the thing to critique it with Dances with Wolves, or with anything Ghibli, or the movie with the oil and the, I'm blanking on it right now. It's very popular. I've seen it multiple times. It starts with a G. Fern Gully, yes. And I get it. I get that part is simplistic, but I think that James Cameron is so committed to showing a lot of the actual violence of it. I think that the way he treats and depicts Pandora and their otherworldly spiritual connection to it is very well done and very well shown, in terms of this idea that they do feel connected to the world around them. And then you can see the people with the technological devices from humans, that it just, everything is kind of wrecking things in their way, and it feels very gross. It feels ugly whenever they do it. And whenever those scenes aren't happening, whenever it's interesting to me that even they go as far as a parallel where some of the machinery is based off of sea animals. I think that one of them's like a crab looking type device, and obviously there might not be much there other than just physical appearance, but I think that it's funny that they still want to emulate and copy that in order to destroy the thing that they are, trying to harvest. Because the second half of this movie has a lot to do with the whaling stuff again. And before we get into that, I really want to dive into a bit more of the environmentalism with Varang, because Varang's another positive. I'm going to say the biggest positive here for me of this movie, along with Quaritch. I mean, don't get me wrong, these are like household names in my head now, like Jake Sully and Neytiri. I know there used to be like, who's the main character's name again? And I definitively know who that is, because I think that he is really good in these. I really like Jake Sully and Neytiri. I like their relationship with each other. They have a very believable relationship, and I think it's because this movie depicts a lot of the main characters as flawed, angry, aggressive, and just all over the place in terms of their emotions. And I think that it lends so much to the family drama dynamic of it all, because I've gone on record here multiple times. I love imperfect main characters. I love imperfect protagonists that have something to either prove or something that is wrong with them that they need to overcome and learn. It's the best thing that you can do for a protagonist, because you don't want to just be, funny enough, you don't want to just be blank slate Avatar. You want to have them really have a form of character development and growth. And I think that Jake Sully's kind of erratic, sometimes falling back into his old ways behavior, because he views violence as the answer. And something that's kind of funny about this movie is at a point it kind of affirms that sometimes violence is the answer. The second half only happens because it reminded me so much of Lord of the Rings, but the second half only happens because they convinced the whales. They're like, we're in old tradition and we can't do that. And they're like, but if you did, they'd go away. And like at that point, it's kind of funny because James Cameron, I don't know what he's trying to say, defend yourself. And usually a movie like this, it would be revenge isn't the answer. And I don't know, I just thought that was a really fascinating depiction of character interaction here. But Varang, let's really get into that. I think that character is phenomenal, played by Una Chaplin. She has such a gravity, what the word is, gravitas, but such a pull to her throughout this entire thing. She is mean and nasty, but also curious and scared about the world around her, about the guns being introduced to her by Quaritch and how their whole dynamic plays out. And I really think that I love that they mirror Jake and Neytiri as like I can make him worse, I can make her worse versions of those characters. And it reminded me so much of like the Goku and Vegeta dynamic, because Quaritch and Sully do have to team up multiple times in this movie, and they find themselves at odds but also begrudgingly helping each other. And it ends up making for really sincere but also funny moments, because this movie doesn't play anything like it's being sardonic or sarcastic. Everything is done with a full commitment to everything being shown. And I really think that Varang's idea, tying back into the whole connection to the spiritual world, that she's lost in the world and angry, and they have this sort of lost connection. It's what makes them so brutal, because their fire burned everything around them. They have no connection to their ancestors and their people. And so they play out like these wild cards that will basically do anything. They're just savages is what they call them. And I really like the commitment to show that instead of just saying it. There's so many different moments where they do act incredibly unpredictably. And Varang especially, there's a moment where you would think that a movie like this would play out a certain way, a scene like this, where Quaritch first goes and he visits the tribe, the Ash people, and he's trying to convince them that they need him. And he has his like right-hand man, and then he shoots one of them, and you would think that it would create this chaos and a whole other action scene, but it doesn't. It ends up leading into this, okay, we're going to talk, and then they do, and then it leads into an insane, just some of the places this movie goes are wild. There's like the scene where they're in the tent and they're taking drugs and he's like tripping out, and they're like, what's going on? And I really liked that. I mean, the visuals of this are always astounding, but that scene especially stood out to me, especially because I guess they were tempted to cut some of it, but James Cameron was like, you want your job, you put all of that back. I mean, I agree. I think it's a very smart moment to keep in. It shows how their dynamic plays into each other, and it is part of Quaritch's almost denial of his own character growth. Sully keeps stating to him throughout the entire movie, I need you to see, if you would just see. But Quaritch is so obsessed with chasing something down in the past. And the second movie has a scene that's Shakespearean, essentially, where he's holding the skull of his former body and he crushes it, and then with ease, and it's him being in the body of the thing that he hated so much. And then here in the third one, he just almost denies and refuses to accept that he could have a new beginning. And it's about that sort of interaction with him and Sully throughout the entire thing, where he seems like he is heading back into the past, into his old ways. And anytime he is tempted, he just denies it again, while Sully is trying to chase new life, is trying to find that family to finally move on, but his past just keeps on catching up with him, and then he has to revert and end up just being the person he no longer wanted to be. And I think that also there are some deep themes with him and his connection with his sons, and the fact that there's a scene kind of in the middle where he almost brings his son to suicide, which was crazy. And the fact that that's in this movie, even briefly, and goes to show that there's a lot of emotional stakes here with how these characters interact with each other and how they feel. And I thought that scene was heartbreaking, and it's really sad. And there's so much going on in this movie that you almost don't process fully every single thing that you see. But one other thing that I think is a gigantic positive here is the action. James Cameron has a thing where nobody does action scenes like him. That's kind of a given. You've seen Aliens, you've seen Terminator 2, but that man has it. there's a scene early on that I think might go on for like half an hour to 45 minutes where it starts all the way up into the Sky Trader people that they have to take Spider and they're going to leave him somewhere else, that he's going to be safe with them and they're going to send him off. And then that basically escalates the entire movie into what's happening. And I think that whole segment all the way down into the forest where they all get separated for a lot of the movie. And that made me realize that I think that this movie is very similar tonally and structurally to Empire Strikes Back. Funny enough, review-wise, maybe too, because it is the darkest of the three. It's very serious, and the action is unpredictable in a great way. I think that you can never anticipate how characters are going to react to things, how they're going to do things, and I really like who ends up getting paired with who. I think that the first action scene in this is so well done in terms of tension, in terms of really setting up the chessboard for how everyone's going to be moving throughout the rest of the movie. And I mean, hey, they have the space, they have the time to really indulge in themselves. And I don't mind lengthy run times as long as it's justified. And I feel like every single second of this movie counts for itself, because James Cameron also likes to establish the world around him. And there are moments that I think other filmmakers or Disney definitely trusts them so much, because I feel like Disney would do this to themselves. There's so many moments where they're just interacting with the nature around them and you're like, is this important? Is this something we need? And it is something important, because the entire essence of these movies is about nature. Yes, you can boil it down to the whole message being nature good, people treating nature might be bad, but there's so much more to it than that in terms of how I think that what that really means, and that how you can really view the things around you with a grace and a beauty, or you could just not acknowledge that at all and just view it with the idea of money in mind. And yes, the humans in this are cowardly and evil and intensely over the top. Could that be a flaw for some people? Yeah, they are almost cartoonishly evil, but they feel like such an outlier in terms of how the Na'vi feel. Like the Na'vi feel like people. And I think that it's supposed to be like a inverse of kind of caricatures where you might see that in a different movie where they paint otherworldly as like one-dimensional. And here I like the idea that the humans are the one-dimensional ones. It seems almost intentional that they are, because they have nothing more on their mind than the superficiality of money and what that does. And I think that the impact of why we get the message here so clearly is because they humanize. And you end up empathizing with the whales that are in this. The Payakan, I believe is what they're called. And they have a whole orderly structure. They make their own music as a line that's in this. They have conversations. And so by the time you see them interact with people and they just kill them, like almost just like nothing, it makes you feel gross whenever they do it. And I think that's a really smart storytelling mechanic to separate the humans from them for so long that when they come back around, I get that. I totally understand where the message is going with that. And do I think that it could be repetitive? Potentially, yes. But I think that the action here is also different enough in terms of some of the things that they go for. Yes, there is. I know some people said the final battle is almost the same as Way of Water, but the whole eclipse stuff, there is a shot that blew my mind. And I didn't even process what I was looking at first, where they are succeeding. And then the eclipse happens where there's this huge glowing backdrop of the eclipse happening, and then the ash people come in, and it looks almost like a reference to Apocalypse Now, but it's just like so expansive and wide. It's jaw-dropping because you don't even realize what you're looking at first, and then they swoop in and you feel the tension there, the kind of overbearing weight of the unpredictability of them, because they are antagonists, yes, but they also are kind of agents of their own devices. And I end up really loving, what I really liked about that as well is whenever they visit, there's a segment that I also think is wonderful where this is where I kind of was like, is this the end of the movie? And then it went on for another hour where Sully is sent to prison and he's finally caught and he's stuck in there. And then there's this whole prison breakout scene that is so good. And he ends up working with this guy, but all the action in that, and Neytiri doing this like thing with her. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the animals that are in this, but her companion through this like very narrow thing, and you can see the camera guiding through it. It's so crazy in terms of the visuals, and you finally get the payoff of the bomb attached to the arrow, and this is just so satisfying to see because it felt like a Chekhov's gun thing from much earlier, and then the Chekhov's gun thing pays off in the middle of the movie, and I really loved all of that stuff. I think that the action is so well done here. I think that what they're doing structurally with the story is so fascinating to me, and I really like the spiritualism that's in these. I really want to know where they're going with some of this stuff. The Sigourney Weaver character I find so interesting in terms of what they're doing. I will say, I don't think I need Spider as a main character. I don't know if they're trying to make him the main character. I certainly hope not, unless there's a really... if they do that for the fourth one, I'm just going to trust the process here and see why. I'm not going to be a person that like even hates on Spider either. I think I just like Jake Sully and Neytiri and all of the family so much more that the ending almost seemed focused on him. He's leading the story forward, and I'm kind of like, no, I don't need that. But if there's a genuine reason for it, fine. But for now, I liked that in this, and I saw where they were going with that here. I really like this idea of Quaritch being... He's very, very funny in this as well. I think that they gave him almost like a co-lead part, and he's really good in this movie. I think that a lot of his one-liners that he just cannot help but make were so funny. They were hilarious. And I gotta say, I think that this movie was just really a phenomenal accomplishment. I thought that the action was stunning. Yes, the message is similar to the other two, but that's just not the only thing that I think this movie's trying to say. I think that the nature of 2 and 3 are also about the cyclical nature of war and how that affects the families within the context of Pandora, and the fact that, yes, the world, they are defending it from humans, but even the human ideals of war and what they're bringing there are still being transferred over. And I would really like to see what they would establish with the fourth one, because I find that these movies are so sincere and hopeful, but there's also a sense of an almost kind of urgency of a cautionary tale behind them. And I think that's what James Cameron's going for. I do think that there are Shakespearean things here because of the fact that there does seem to be tragedy boiling underneath the surface of this. And I do think that part of it, if I were to come up with a theory for 4 or 5, there's going to be an element of this could have been avoided. And I love engaging with these movies because they feel like they have a lot to say once you get past the visuals, which is ironic to say. But I do think that these movies, 2 and 3 especially, are wonderful. 1 I can stick with and just say I like, but 2 and 3 I think are just genuinely stunning accomplishments in terms of visuals, but also the underrated aspects of them, I guess, are the stories. I think that they have a lot that they're inspired by, and this one felt very heavy on the Old Testament and very biblical in terms of its grand epic storytelling. And overall, I loved this. If they choose to end it here, I'll be sad, but I'll understand. It ends off in a good place. But 4 and 5, I kind of need. I kind of really, really want those to come out. And it's funny that I gave the second one the score because I was so surprised when I did. It ended up making it my top 10 of the year. And I think that this is the best of the 3, pretty significantly to me. I thought that about Way of Water when I saw it. I saw that movie like 4 times in theaters. Worth it. I'm going to do that again here. I'm going to see it in the original, like the Bob Bullock IMAX with the high frame rate, need to, 3D. It was just jaw-dropping. I thought that this movie was essentially perfect. The only thing I guess I could critique is that I wish that there was a bit more of the Ash people and what they've got going on. But if they really are doing this in terms of how anime is told, maybe we'll get more of them in the fourth one. I think that Varang needs to be a consistent villain because she's also an incredible force in this. Every single bit of her eye acting, her movement, the way she like slinks is just stunning. 5 out of 5. I'm giving this a 5 out of 5. Very solid 5 out of 5. God, this movie's good. What did you think of Avatar: Fire and Ash? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? If you hated it, I've seen that a couple times. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's like still fresh on Rotten Tomatoes and everything, but I think that this does have a bit more of a divisive feel this time around. But not from audiences, but from critics. I mean, what, near 70% divisive, but still loved this. And then it's going to be 2 years from now, we're going to be like, oh, we all love Fire and Ash, right? But it always happens. Up next, The Housemaid, starring Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried. I'm super excited to talk about that. But for now, guys, remember to subscribe, and thank you so much for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.